Welcome to KCS at Home Summer Edition. This is Social Studies, second grade, Activity 1. If this video is hard to understand, turn on closed captions if available. Adjust the playback speed to slow down the video. Consider watching short clips, then pause, listen, and watch again. Ask someone in your home to watch the video with you. Stop frequently and talk to your partner about what you heard and understood. Hello, my name is Jessica Seaton, and I teach third grade at Christenberry Elementary. Before we begin with today's lesson, I'd like to give a shout out to all my little Berry Cardinals there from Christenberry. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about Davy Crockett and Sequoia. Both are famous Tennessee heroes. And the first person we're going to talk about is Sequoia. Sequoia was the creator of the Cherokee alphabet. He was born in Tuskegee, Tennessee. He moved to Georgia and became a silversmith. A white man told him to sign his work, but Sequoia didn't know how. A wealthy white man taught him how to write his name. Because of this, Sequoia got the idea to figure out a writing system for the Cherokee Indians. He moved to Alabama and fought in the War of 1812, but he couldn't write letters to his family because he still didn't know how to write. After the war, he began creating a writing system for the Cherokee that used symbols to represent sounds. Isn't that somewhat kind of like our alphabet that we use today? He created 85 letters that were called talking leaves. The Cherokee Indians accepted his alphabet in 1821, and because of Sequoia, thousands of Cherokee Indians learned how to read and write. In 1824, he was given a Medal of Honor for his work. This is what the Cherokee alphabet looks like. Do any of these symbols look familiar to our alphabet? Some important events about Sequoia's life is he was born around 1770. No one has an exact date or time. In 1791, he learned how to make things out of silver. In 1812, he fought in the War of 1812. In 1821, the Cherokee Nation accepted his alphabet. In 1824, he was given a Medal of Honor. And in 1843, Sequoia died, but no one knows for sure where he is buried. So let's stop and think about this for a minute. What was it like for the Cherokee Indians before Sequoia created an alphabet for them to use? How did they communicate with each other? How did they record all of the important events about the Cherokee? Why was it important for Sequoia to create an alphabet for his people? Let's learn a little bit more about Sequoia in his life by watching a video.
Sequoia was a Cherokee Indian. In his younger years, Sequoia had been injured in a hunting accident, and this left him disabled. Being disabled gave him a lot of time to sit and think. He wanted to be able to have Cherokee Indians share ideas and be informed on the latest news around them, but there was no written Cherokee language. Sequoia solved that problem, and he developed the first Cherokee alphabet in 1821. Many of his friends made fun of him for wanting to develop the written Cherokee language, but he continued on to his goal. People ended up liking that they could communicate through writing, and his language was officially adopted by the Cherokee Indian tribe in 1825. Sequoia developed the first Cherokee newspaper called the Cherokee Phoenix. The newspaper helped people be informed of the latest news when before things were only passed by word of mouth. Sequoia was awarded a silver medallion for his accomplishment, and he wore it for the rest of his life.
If you want to learn more about Sequoia, you can go to Vonore, Tennessee. There is a Sequoia museum there for it. You can learn more about him. So now let's talk a little bit about our friend, Davy Crockett. Again, his real name is David Crockett, but most people know him as Davy Crockett. David Crockett was a frontiersman and a member of Congress. Let's see a little bit about him and learn a little bit more about him on a video.
Davy Crockett was a frontiersman. He was also a member of Congress, and he fought at the Alamo. Let's look at the history of this unique American hero. Davy Crockett was born in 1786 in Tennessee. Now, this was just 10 years before Tennessee became an official state of the United States of America. Now, Davy Crockett grew up in and lived most of his life on the frontier. The word frontier means the wilderness. Life was hard on the frontier. There were no shops. You had to hunt, grow, and find everything to live on. When he was 12 years old, he worked at a cattle drive to earn money for his family. Davy Crockett was a hard worker. As a young man, Davy Crockett fought in the Creek War, which was in present-day Alabama. The Creek War was a war between the frontiersmen and the Native Americans, where they fought over the land. In 1827, Davy Crockett was elected to Congress. His community in Tennessee wanted Davy Crockett to represent them in Congress. Congress is the part of the government that works together to make laws for our country. In 1835, Davy Crockett moved to Texas because he lost his job in Congress and didn't like the laws that were getting passed against Native Americans. Now, this was when Texas was part of Mexico. But just like the United States did from Britain, Texas declared independence that next year from Mexico. They wanted to be their own country. Davy Crockett fought for Texas at the Alamo, where he was killed in battle. While they lost the battle at Alamo, Texas later won independence and were their own country until becoming a state of the USA in 1845. After his death, Davy Crockett became a folk hero. There was a TV show about him, there were books, kids dressed up like Davy Crockett in costumes, and there was a song about him that called him the king of the wild frontier. Davy Crockett, a frontiersman who nobody would have guessed would become a member of Congress and also go on to fight at the Alamo. He fought at the Alamo for Texas's independence and became an American folk hero.
So if you wanted to learn more about Davy Crockett, you could go, and I know on Disney Plus there's a video about Davy Crockett right now. So you could go on Disney Plus and watch the Davy Crockett video. So let's talk more about Davy Crockett. In his early life, he was born in East Tennessee on August 17th, 1786, and he is one of 9 children of pioneer parents, John and Rebecca Crockett. John struggled to make ends meet, and the family moved several times throughout Crockett's childhood. Davy was often hired out to help pay his family's debts. Crockett received no significant academic education. For much of his teenage life, his teacher was the frontier, and remember from the video, we learned that frontier means wilderness, where he became a skilled woodsman, scout, and hunter. On August the 14th, 1806, Crockett married Mary Polly Finley. The couple had 3 children and moved to Franklin County, Tennessee, to a farm Crockett named Kentuck. After Polly died in 1815, Crockett married widow Elizabeth Patton. Crockett and Elizabeth had 3 more children together. In 1813, Crockett joined the Tennessee militia as a scout and fought against the Creek Indians in Alabama. During the War of 1812, Crockett re-enlisted as a 3rd sergeant under Captain John Cowan. He went to Spanish Florida to help Andrew Jackson clear British forces, including British-trained Indians from the region. After being discharged in 1815, he returned home where his wife Polly soon died. He remarried and moved his family to Lawrence County, Tennessee, and started several businesses and began his political career. In 1817, Crockett became public commissioner of Lawrence County. Later that year, he was elected justice of the peace and then became a lieutenant colonel in the Tennessee militia. After resigning those posts, he won a seat in the Tennessee General Assembly representing Lawrence and Hickman counties, where he fought for the tax and land rights of poor settlers and refined his speaking skills. After losing his businesses to flooding, Davie moved to Carroll County and was again elected to the General Assembly in 1823. He lost a bid for Congress in 1825 and returned to the private sector. He ran for Congress in 1829 and won a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives and lost his final bid in 1834. He often opposed President Andrew Jackson's political platform, although at first he supported him. While in Congress, Crockett made a name for himself as a gifted storyteller. He also became the subject of a series of books which included tall tales about him bear hunting and being a frontiersman. Crockett and a 30-man armed brigade arrived in Texas in January of 1836 during the Texas War for Independence. Crockett swore allegiance and to help fight in exchange for land and arrived at the Alamo in February. On February 23rd, General Santa Anna and his troops laid siege to the Alamo. Santa Anna was against Crockett. Despite Sam Houston's advice to abandon San Antonio, the Alamo defenders dug in and held out until Mexican soldiers killed them all. Crockett is thought to have died defending the Alamo. So let's talk about today's tasks. You have 2 tasks for today, and we're going to read a little bit about Sequoia and his syllabary. And there's a fun activity to go with it, and then we're going to learn a little bit more about Davy Crockett. So let me read the article that I would like for you to do independently. The North American natives were fascinated by something the white man had that they did not have, his talking leaves, which is what some called the books and written documents with which the whites communicated. Although the natives had rich systems of language and a long heritage of oral literature, none had a written language apart from the pictographs with which they left messages on cave walls or rocks. A half-blood Cherokee named Sequoia, whose English name was George Guess, realized that being able to write and read gave the white newcomers a great advantage socially and politically over his people. So he set out in 1820 to analyze his own language and develop a system of writing for it. He listened carefully to how he and his people spoke and decided that the Cherokee language could have been broken down into 86 syllables based on sound. The process of inventing a written alphabet called a syllabary took several years of trial and error. He first attempted the almost impossible task of designing a pictograph for every word in the language. When he realized this would be extremely difficult, he returned to his discovery of the 86 sounds in the language and designed a symbol for each of these sounds. Simply by memorizing all these symbols, he thought any person who could speak the language would be able to read it. The new system was not perfect. It lacked a means of punctuation, and the symbols were complicated and could be easily distorted. At the time, there were 3 distinct dialects in Cherokee, which made it sometimes difficult to translate. Nonetheless, within a very short time, thousands of Cherokees were literate in their own language and were writing letters and passing notes to one another. Sequoia soon convinced the tribal chiefs that their language had been put into written form, and the council put all their laws into the Sequoian syllabary. English remained the official language of the land. However, although only about 15% of the Cherokees spoke it at that time, Sequoians, as it was called, could be learned in one day by the people, and it was greatly advanced their ability to communicate and transact business. However, it did deter some Cherokees from learning English because they thought since they had written a language of their own, they would not need to learn English. Within a very short time, the Cherokees had crossed the dividing line between pre-literacy and being literate. It was a tremendous accomplishment. Before long, the Cherokee community had its own newspaper, the Cherokee Phoenix. By 1825, most Cherokees could both read and write, and many of them were bilingual and biliterate in Sequoian and English. So the fun activity I want us to do today is there's two things. On this page, I want to see if you could write a message using the Sequoian syllabary. On this page, you're going to create a code to solve the famous quote. I've kind of helped you out here. So for letter A, the number is 21. Do you know what the next number would probably be? That's right. The next number would be 22. So after you fill in all of your numbers up here, you're going to go down here and you're going to use the letter that correlates with the number to create your message. Now, let's talk about Davy Crockett. Your task for Davy Crockett is we're going to read a passage and then we're going to use the information to answer the questions. Have you ever heard of Davy Crockett? He was born in the hills of Tennessee in 1786. He had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. They lived in a cabin made of logs from trees that had been chopped down and only had 2 rooms. Davy's shirt, pants, and shoes were all made from deer. It was called buckskin, and his favorite hat was made of a raccoon. It was called a coonskin cap. Davy grew up learning to hunt from a very early age. When Davy was 13 years old, his dad wanted him to go to school to learn to read and write. Davy only went 4 days a week. There was a bully at school, and they would beat him up, and Davy didn't want to go to school, and so he ran away. Davy had to work very hard so that he could have a place to live and so he could eat. It wasn't easy being away from his mom and dad. One day, Davy returned home and everyone was glad to see him. When Davy grew up, he was one of the best hunters around. When he was nearly 20 years old, Davy got married and had a family. In 1813, he had to go fight in the War of 1812. During the war, his men were starving. So Davy did what he knew best. He went hunting and got his men something to eat. Years later, Davy went to Congress to make sure that Tennessee got to have a say in the government. He was what is called a representative because he represented the people of his state. In October of 1835, when Davy was 49 years old, he decided to go to Texas. Texas did not belong to the United States at the time. It belonged to Mexico. But Texas wanted to be free. So Davy and his men decided to help. They went to a place called the Alamo. There, Davy and his men fought very hard battle against Santa Anna. Davy and his men died and lost the battle. But because of them, Texas became a free state. So you're going to use the information from what you've learned in the video and our presentation and the text to answer these questions. Which state was Davy Crockett born? What kind of house did Davy live in? When Davy went to Congress, what was he called? And how did Davy die? What was Davy Crockett's contribution? Those are very key important information. I hope that you learned a little bit more about the famous Tennesseans that I have talked about today, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye.